It was supposed to be just another Friday night. Friends gathered together, drinks flowing freely, laughter spilling into the streets of a city that never seemed to rest. Nothing about the night felt unusual. Nothing warned them of what was coming. But by the time the sun rose, one life would be gone, and the person responsible would be someone trusted for years. This is not a story about strangers lurking in the dark. It's about a danger that felt familiar, the kind that sits across from you at the table, listens as you speak, learns your habits, and memorizes your weaknesses. It's about trust given freely, and the moment it's turned into a weapon. These friends shared everything: inside jokes, personal struggles, weekend plans. They believed they knew one another completely, but hidden among them was a side no one recognized, a truth carefully concealed behind smiles and laughter. The night began with music, photos, and harmless fun. Yet beneath it all, tension quietly crept in, unnoticed, unspoken, ignored. As the hours passed, small moments began to matter. Conversations that seemed harmless, glances that lingered too long, decisions that felt insignificant at the time. Each step moved them closer to betrayal. What started as an ordinary night out slowly transformed into something no one could control. This story follows the final hours of a life cut short, not by accident, not by chance, but by a deliberate choice. A choice made by someone who should have protected, not destroyed. Someone who knew the right places, the right timing, and used that knowledge to shatter trust forever. It's a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous threat isn't a stranger at all. What you're about to watch is a real account of a friendship fractured beyond repair. Hidden resentments festered in silence, and a night unfolded where everything that could go wrong did, because someone wanted it that way. This is the story of how trust became a weapon, and how a single evening unraveled into a tragedy no one saw coming, except perhaps the one person who had been planning it all along. They had known each other since college. 6 people bound not just by time, but by shared memories, private jokes, and a history so deep it made them feel untouchable. Together, they believed they had already survived the hardest parts of growing up. Marcus was the center of the group. Confident, charismatic, always the one planning trips and pulling everyone together. Sarah balanced him out, thoughtful, observant, the friend who remembered birthdays and noticed when someone wasn't quite themselves. Jake had been Marcus's closest friend since freshman year, loyal in a way that never wavered, even when it probably should have. The circle wouldn't have been complete without the others. Emily brought energy and creativity, always pushing the group toward the next adventure. David was quieter, steady, the one everyone trusted to show up when it mattered most. And Rachel was driven and sharp-witted, moving quickly through her career while the rest watched with a mix of pride and admiration. For nearly 10 years, they were inseparable. They traveled together, spent holidays as a chosen family, and turned casual brunches into long evenings that blurred into night. From the outside, they looked like proof that adult friendships could survive careers, relationships, and the slow pull of responsibility. There were things they never talked about, moments that slipped past without confrontation, then settled quietly beneath the surface. Like Rachel received a promotion, the same one Marcus had applied for. He had congratulated her with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, and afterward, something subtle shifted. Conversations felt shorter. The easy confidence between them thinned, just enough to be noticed. Then there was the weekend Emily spent with Jake's ex-girlfriend. It wasn't meant to mean anything. Jake laughed when he heard about it, brushed it off like it didn't matter. But from that point on, he never looked at Emily the same way again. The warmth cooled, the distance lingered. Sarah saw it all. She noticed how certain topics brought conversations to a sudden stop, how invitations quietly changed shape. The group chat that once buzzed constantly would go silent for days, only for her to discover later that smaller conversations had continued without her. Money added another layer. 2 years earlier, David had loaned Marcus a significant amount for a business idea that never came to life. It was never openly discussed, but it didn't need to be. David's repayment requests arrived disguised as jokes, light-hearted messages that carried an edge. Over time, they became harder to ignore. None of it seemed serious enough to break a friendship that had lasted nearly a decade, not on its own. But resentment doesn't arrive loudly. It builds slowly, quietly, in the spaces where honesty should have lived. And one day, without warning, the weight becomes too heavy to carry. Friday, October 13th. The plan was simple. Dinner at their usual spot downtown, then drinks at the new rooftop bar everyone had been talking about. Marcus sent the group text at 4 p.m. "Tonight's the night, crew. 7 p.m. sharp. No excuses." They gathered at La Strada, their booth in the back corner already waiting. The Instagram photos from that evening show 6 smiling faces, wine glasses raised, the warm glow of string lights overhead. Sarah posted one with the caption, "My people, heart." It would be deleted by Monday. Surveillance footage from the restaurant shows them arriving separately, Marcus and Jake together, Rachel alone, David and Emily arriving within minutes of each other, Sarah last. The footage also shows something else. Marcus checking his phone constantly, his jaw tightening with each glance. Jake leaning over to say something, Marcus shaking his head. They ordered appetizers to share, bottles of wine, their usual orders memorized by servers who'd seen them dozens of times before. To anyone watching, it was a typical evening among old friends. But David would later tell police that something felt off from the start. The jokes landed differently. The silences lasted too long. By 9:30 p.m., they'd moved to the rooftop bar 3 blocks away. More drinks, more photos. The music was loud enough that real conversation became impossible, which might have been a relief. The digital footprint tells a story the smiling photos don't. At 9:47 p.m., Rachel texted her sister, "This is so awkward, might leave early." She didn't send it in the group chat. At 10:03 p.m., Emily excused herself to the bathroom and didn't return for 20 minutes. Surveillance shows her outside on the phone, pacing, visibly agitated. Sarah noticed Marcus and Jake step away to the far corner of the rooftop, their conversation intense, too quiet to hear over the music. When they returned, Marcus ordered a shot, then another. Jake wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. David tried to lighten the mood with a story about his disastrous attempt at cooking Thanksgiving dinner, but even he seemed to sense it was futile. Rachel kept checking the time. Emily had gone silent, nursing the same drink for an hour. The group that had arrived together was fragmenting, even as they stood in the same space, physical proximity masking emotional distance. It's a phenomenon we've all experienced, being lonely in a crowd, realizing that showing up isn't the same as being present. But this was different. This wasn't just drift. Something specific was wrong, and everyone could feel it, even if no one knew exactly what it was. It happened near the bar, Marcus waiting for another round, when Jake approached. Witnesses later reported raised voices, though the exact words were lost to the ambient noise. What security footage shows is clear enough. Jake pointing at Marcus, his face flushed. Marcus stepping back, then forward, closing the distance. Jake's hand on Marcus's chest, Marcus knocking it away. Sarah intervened, pulling Jake back toward the group. Rachel grabbed Marcus's arm, saying something urgent in his ear. Whatever had been simmering had finally boiled over, at least for a moment. But then, as quickly as it started, it stopped. Marcus forced a smile, raised his hands in mock surrender. Jake nodded, turned away. To anyone not paying close attention, it might have looked like nothing, just 2 drunk friends having a moment that passed. Emily would later tell investigators she asked Jake what happened. He said, "Nothing, just old business, we're good." But they weren't good. everyone knew it. The confrontation ended without resolution, which is often more dangerous than an outright fight. At least in a fight, positions are clear. This was something else, a warning perhaps, or a final chance that was refused. By midnight, the unified evening had completely fractured. Rachel announced she was calling it a night, ordering an Uber. The app shows her request at 12:07 a.m., pickup confirmed at 12:15 a.m. She hugged everyone except Marcus, a detail she wouldn't remember until detectives asked her about it specifically. David and Emily decided to walk to a diner a few blocks away, suddenly starving after hours of drinking. David's credit card statement shows a charge at Tony's 24-hour at 12:43 a.m. They would be each other's alibis. That left Marcus, Jake, and Sarah. The original trio, the core of the friend group. Sarah suggested one more bar, a quieter place where they could actually talk. Marcus agreed immediately. Jake hesitated, then nodded. Cell tower data shows all three phones moving together toward the Lower East Side. Text records show Marcus messaging someone not in the friend group. On my way, 20 minutes. The recipient's identity would become crucial to the investigation. They arrived at a dive bar called The Lantern at 1:15 a.m. The bartender would later describe them as tense but not hostile. Sarah ordered water. Marcus and Jake ordered whiskey, neat. At 1:47 a.m., Sarah's phone shows an Uber request. She told detectives she felt like a third wheel to something I didn't understand. She hugged both men, made them promise to text when they got home safely. Neither of them would. The last confirmed sighting of Marcus and Jake together shows them leaving the Lantern at approximately 2:20 a.m. Security footage captures them walking east toward the river, Marcus slightly ahead, Jake following. After that, the trail goes dark. Between 2:20 a.m. and 6:45 a.m., there is a gap. Not a complete void. Cell phone data shows movement, brief connections to towers, GPS coordinates that would later be mapped with forensic precision, but no direct evidence of what actually happened during those hours. Jake's phone went silent first. The last ping registered at 2:51 a.m. near a parking structure on Cherry Street. Then nothing. No calls, no texts, no social media activity. For someone who averaged over 100 phone interactions per day, the silence was deafening. Marcus's phone remained active longer, a text at 3:12 a.m. to the same unknown number from earlier, "It's done." Another at 3:47 a.m., "Can you come now?" At 4:33 a.m., a call to that number lasting 3 minutes. Then, like Jake's, the phone went dark. No witnesses have come forward describing seeing either man during this window. No surveillance footage has been found. Whatever happened occurred in the gaps between cameras, in the spaces where the city's constant observation briefly blinks. This is where speculation becomes tempting, where the mind races to fill emptiness with narrative. But the truth is simpler and more unsettling. For nearly 4.5 hours, two people existed beyond the reach of our digital panopticon, and only one of them would ever be seen alive again. The call came in at 6:47 a.m. A jogger running along the East River Greenway had spotted something wrong near Pier 42, something that made her stop, move closer, then immediately pull out her phone. First responders arrived within 8 minutes. What they found was a body, partially concealed behind maintenance equipment near the water's edge. Male, late 20s to early 30s, wearing dark jeans and a gray jacket. No visible signs of trauma from a distance, but up close, the story was different. It was Jake. The medical examiner would later determine the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, followed by strangulation. The time of death was estimated between 3 and 4 a.m. His wallet was still in his pocket, cards and cash intact. His phone was gone. The location was significant. Pier 42 wasn't a destination, it was isolated, poorly lit, surrounded by construction barriers. You wouldn't end up there by accident, especially not at 3 a.m. Someone had chosen this place deliberately for its emptiness, its lack of witnesses. Jake's face was peaceful, almost serene, which investigators found disturbing. There were no defensive wounds on his hands. Toxicology would later show a blood alcohol content of 0.11, enough to impair judgment, but not enough to render him helpless. Whatever happened, it happened quickly, or it happened with someone he didn't think he needed to defend himself against. By 8 a.m., the scene was a controlled chaos of crime scene tape, photographers, detectives, and the growing awareness among NYPD that this wasn't random violence. This was personal. Detective Linda Chen caught the case. 20 years on the force, the last 8 in homicide, she'd seen enough to know what mattered: victimology, timeline, and the first 48 hours. Jake's ID gave them a name immediately, and within an hour, they'd notified his parents upstate. The sound of his mother's scream for the phone would stay with the officer who made that call for the rest of her career. Chen's team moved quickly. Jake's apartment was secured. His car, found parked near his building, was towed for processing. Phone records were subpoenaed, social media was scraped, and, most importantly, his recent contacts were identified and located. By noon, detectives were knocking on doors. Rachel, still in her apartment, collapsed when they told her. David and Emily, having breakfast together at her place, went pale. Sarah was at the gym when they reached her. She vomited in the parking lot. And Marcus? Marcus wasn't home. His phone went straight to voicemail. His roommate hadn't seen him since Friday evening. His car was gone. Every homicide detective knows that the person you can't find is usually the person you need to find most urgently. An all-points bulletin went out within the hour. Marcus's photo, vehicle description, last known location, broadcast to every patrol car in the tri-state area. But Chen was patient. She didn't need to find Marcus immediately because she knew something important. Everyone returns eventually, either because they think they've gotten away with it or because they have nowhere else to go. The interviews began Saturday afternoon. Each friend arrived at the precinct separately, still in shock, still processing. Chen and her partner conducted each interview personally, watching for the details that didn't align. Rachel's account was straightforward. She left the bar around 12:15 a.m., gone straight home, watched Netflix until she fell asleep around 2 a.m. Her Uber receipt and Netflix viewing history corroborated everything. She seemed genuinely devastated, kept asking who would do this. She had no answer. David and Emily's timelines matched perfectly, almost too perfectly, Chen noted, though their diner receipt and the waitress's memory confirmed their story. They'd walked, talked, eaten, then gone back to Emily's apartment. They'd fallen asleep watching a movie. Neither had heard from Jake after leaving the rooftop bar. Sarah's interview took longer. She'd been the last of the friend group to see Jake alive, except for Marcus. She described the evening in careful detail. The awkward tension, the confrontation she'd witnessed, her decision to leave. But when Chen asked what Marcus and Jake had argued about, Sarah hesitated. "I don't know exactly," she said. "Jake mentioned something about money, and something else. Something about not covering for you anymore. I couldn't hear everything." That phrase, "not covering for you anymore," shifted the entire investigation. It implied history, secrets, complicity. It suggested Jake knew something about Marcus that he'd been protecting until he wasn't willing to anymore. When Chen asked Sarah if she knew what Jake meant, Sarah shook her head, but her eyes said something different. She knew, or suspected, something she wasn't ready to say. Marcus was found Sunday evening at a motel outside Philadelphia, registered under his own name. When detectives arrived, he didn't run. He didn't resist. He simply asked, "How did you find me?" as though the question mattered. In interrogation, Marcus was calm at first, almost eerily so. He confirmed the timeline, admitted to leaving the bar with Jake, described their walk toward the river. But when Chen asked what happened at the pier, Marcus went silent. "He was going to ruin me," Marcus finally said. "Do you understand that? Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built, he was going to destroy it because of some moral high ground that didn't even make sense." The details emerged slowly, painfully. 2 years earlier, Marcus had embezzled money from the startups he and David had attempted to launch. Not a lot at first, just enough to cover personal expenses while he figured things out, but then more and more. David didn't know. The accounting was Marcus's responsibility, but Jake had found out. Jake had covered for him, helped him hide the discrepancies, believing Marcus when he swore he'd pay it back. Except, Marcus never paid it back. He couldn't. The money was gone, spent on maintaining an image of success he couldn't afford. And recently, David had started asking questions, wanting to audit the books before fully closing out the failed company. Jake had begged Marcus to come clean, to tell David the truth before he discovered it himself, but Marcus refused. So Jake made a decision. If Marcus wouldn't confess, Jake would tell David himself, that Friday night. "He didn't leave me a choice," Marcus told detectives, as though this explained anything. "We were walking, and he kept saying how he had to do it, how it was the right thing, and I couldn't let that happen." Marcus described it with an unsettling detachment, the argument that became physical, Jake pushing him, Marcus pushing back, harder, Jake falling, hitting his head on a concrete barrier. The moment of panic, then the cold calculation. Jake was dazed, vulnerable. Marcus made a choice. He strangled his best friend with his bare hands, not in rage, not in passion, but in the quiet determination of someone who decided that his secret was worth more than Jake's life. Afterward, Marcus called someone, a friend from college who owed him a favor. Together, they disposed of Jake's phone, cleaned the scene as best they could, and Marcus fled. He thought he had days, maybe weeks. He didn't understand that modern investigations move at the speed of data. Marcus was charged with second-degree murder. His attorney tried to argue manslaughter, claiming the initial blow was accidental, but the strangulation eliminated any possibility of that defense. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning a guilty verdict. He was sentenced to 25 years to life. The friend group shattered completely. Rachel moved to California, cutting ties with everyone. David and Emily tried to maintain their friendship, but eventually drifted apart, the trauma too embedded in their connection. Sarah attended every day of the trial, sitting behind Jake's family, publicly severing any relationship with Marcus. Jake's parents established a scholarship in his name for students studying ethics and philosophy. At the dedication ceremony, his mother said, "My son believed in doing the right thing, even when it cost him everything. He died for that belief. I have to find a way to make that mean something." David eventually learned about the embezzlement during the trial. He testified against Marcus, describing not just the financial betrayal, but the deeper one, the way Marcus had led him believe in their friendship while systematically destroying it from within. The ripple effects extended beyond the immediate circle. Friends from college, co-workers, family members, all grappling with the same questions. How did we miss this? Were there signs? Could this have been prevented? Marcus was charged with second-degree murder. His attorney tried to argue manslaughter, claiming the initial blow was accidental, but the strangulation eliminated any possibility of that defense. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning a guilty verdict. He was sentenced to 25 years to life. The friend group shattered completely. Rachel moved to California, cutting ties with everyone. David and Emily tried to maintain their friendship, but eventually drifted apart, the trauma too embedded in their connection. Sarah attended every day of the trial, sitting behind Jake's family, publicly severing any relationship with Marcus. Jake's parents established a scholarship in his name for students studying ethics and philosophy. At the dedication ceremony, his mother said, "My son believed in doing the right thing, even when it cost him everything. He died for that belief. I have to find a way to make that mean something." David eventually learned about the embezzlement during the trial. He testified against Marcus, describing not just the financial betrayal, but the deeper one, the way Marcus had led him believe in their friendship while systematically destroying it from within. The ripple effects extended beyond the immediate circle. Friends from college, co-workers, family members, all grappling with the same questions. How did we miss this? Were there signs? Could this have been prevented? There's a photograph that Jake's family shared after his death. It shows the friend group from 5 years earlier, at graduation. arms around each other, futures bright and unlimited. Marcus is standing next to Jake, their heads tilted together, laughing at something lost to time. Looking at that photo now, knowing what we know, it's tempting to search for clues, warnings, shadows of the future hidden in plain sight. But there's nothing there. Just 6 people who loved each other, or thought they did. The question that haunts everyone who knew them is simple and impossible. When did Marcus decide Jake's life was worth less than his reputation? Was it a single moment, that night by the river, or was it a slow erosion, each small compromise leading to the next, until murder became thinkable? We trust our friends with our secrets, our vulnerabilities, our lives. We have to. Connection requires faith. But sometimes that trust is misplaced. Sometimes the person who knows you best becomes the person most capable of destroying you precisely because they know where you're vulnerable. Jake went with Marcus that night because he trusted him. Even after everything, even knowing what Marcus had done, Jake believed they could resolve it as friends. That faith killed him. The tragedy isn't just that Jake died, it's that he died believing in the possibility of redemption for someone who had already moved past redemption. He died hoping for honesty from someone who'd built his life on lies. He died trusting a friend who'd already decided friendship was negotiable. This is the danger that lives closest to us, not the stranger in the dark, but the familiar face across the table, the person who knows your routines, your weaknesses, your trust, the person who can destroy you without anyone suspecting, until it's too late. Jake's death is a reminder that betrayal doesn't announce itself. It wears the mask of friendship until the moment it doesn't, and by then, the knife is already in your back. The story ends at Pier 42, but the questions echo beyond that. How well do you really know the people you trust? What secrets might they be keeping? And at what point does protecting yourself justify destroying someone else? There are no comforting answers, just the cold reality that sometimes the most dangerous person in your life is the one you'd never suspect. And sometimes they're right beside you until the very end.